For children with cancer and other conditions, the way that they experience healthcare often sucks. And my guest today is very passionate about improving that. So my guest is Dom Raban, and he's the founder and CEO of Xploro Health. And Xploro Health are doing some cool stuff. They are using augmented reality, AI, and games to reduce anxiety for young patients going to hospital. Now, the reason Dom feels so passionate about this is because his daughter had Ewing sarcoma, which is a very rare type of bone cancer. And her experience of healthcare, well, let's say could have been better. And what Dom does now is that he builds these experiences for children going through healthcare to make their experience of the whole journey better. As I say, using augmented reality, digital characters and avatars to help guide them, but also educate them about the healthcare that they're having. So what is an MRI? Why should you stay still? What is going to happen to you when you go through that corridor into that room for that surgery, etc. And so educating the children on that, but really focused on the gaming side of it and making it enjoyable, and that being the first principle, so that they're not going on there to learn about it and it's laborious. They want to go on there to play a game, and they learn as a secondary benefit. And I talked with Dom about the value of that for the organizations, the fact that children that are educated about an MRI will actually stay still and reduce the need for a second scan, and therefore reducing the cost of the hospital. Also, the fact that they will actually turn up to appointments because they and the parents are very aware and engaged in their care, and they know the value of that appointment. They know why they're doing it. They know why they should be there. And also this concept of health literacy leading to better self-managers of care later in life too. So there are all these benefits to actually knowing and understanding their health as a child. Now, we talked about some other stuff, but the one thing I want to pull out here is that they have at Xploro Health an expert advisory board. Now, if I say expert advisory board, you're probably picturing quite a lot of older people sat around a table. Theirs is 8-year-olds, well, between 8 and 16-year-olds of expert advisors, and they are specifically like user experience advisors. They hand these experiences to 8-year-olds on their expert advisory board, and they just tell them whether this is rubbish or not. And there's an example of them doing loads of work and loads of sunk costs down to making these avatars more photorealistic, I think, and them just being told it sucks by their expert 8-year-old advisory board. So, Dom is not afraid at all of really leaning into his values, that the patient experience is the biggest thing that matters. And when it comes to children, well, those expert advisors need to be 8-year-olds. So this is a really interesting episode. It's got that personal story from Dom in it. We've got a lot in here about patient experience. And I feel like I've really, renewed and refreshed what it means to care about patients' experience and what it means to actually involve patients in that journey. So I'm very grateful to Dom for that. I hope you enjoy this one today. Hey everybody, this week I am joined by Dom Raban, and he's the co-founder and CEO of Xploro, which is a digital therapeutics platform that uses AR, AI and games to reduce anxiety for young patients to hospital. Dom has got a very interesting story behind this, and he has done lots of interesting stuff in his career. So Dom, welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, James.
Excellent. Good to have you on, mate, and really looking forward to talking about this because not least, I feel like you will understand me and what I'm doing. I feel like you've walked a similar path to me with the agency model, and you've gone on to do exciting things in tech and all the rest of it. I suppose leaning into the single horse in the race rather than managing all the horses in the race with your own tech company now. So yeah, looking forward to getting into it, man. Before we kick off, whereabouts are you speaking to us from today?
So I'm actually in the attic of my home in Preston in the northwest of England, but the business is based in Manchester and Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, wow. Interesting. We have some friends that live in Cleveland, actually. So they live in Akron, so not Cleveland, but
yeah. Akron, no, well, so our chief strategy officer lives in Akron.
Excellent, lovely.
And I'm there in 2 weeks' time.
Very nice part of the world, that, I must say. Very interesting. Never heard it before. Never heard of a health tech company based there, but first for everything.
It's a big health tech centre with Cleveland Clinic. And
is it? Of course. Especially with their move over to London as well. Yeah, goodness, interesting. So Dom, listen, why don't you tell us your story? I know that, as I say, there's a bit of agency model in there and learning business that way and going on to your own tech company now and all sorts of bits and bobs with what you're doing globally. So yeah, kick off and tell us your story, mate.
Yeah, well, I've certainly been around the block a few times. I started my first agency, 1991 was my first agency. That then led to managing 2 or 3 agencies after that. The Xploro story is really nothing to do with that. Well, I suppose it has something to do with that agency experience in that, I've spent many years in design and software development, primarily doing that for other people in the agency model. But Xploro comes about through personal experience. So back in 2011, my daughter, who was 13 at the time, was diagnosed with Ewing's sarcoma, which is, no cancer is great, but it's a particularly aggressive and dangerous cancer. I have to say, she's 20, coming up to, let me get this right, 25 now, and doing really good. So, but when she was diagnosed, she went through, as I'm sure you can imagine, a pretty horrendous year of treatment. She was treated at 6 different hospitals in total. The NHS paid for us as a family of 4 to go and live in Florida for 10 weeks, and that wasn't a holiday. That was proton beam therapy. The net effect of all of that treatment was that she came out with a good prognosis, but what was missing from her treatment was information. So she had no information about the people she'd meet, coming into a hospital or any healthcare setting, really confusing, so many different roles. You've got no idea who everyone is. No one explained that to her. She had no information about the environment she was coming into before she went into them. So, every time she went into a hospital setting, really scary. And then no information about any of the technologies that were being used to treat her. So, a case in point was one day I remember them wheeling over a big machine to her bedside and plugging her in without telling her what they were doing. And they were attempting to do a stem cell harvest. And, that failed because she was non-compliant. And she was non-compliant because she didn't know what was going on. And so when she came out of treatment, I got really interested in the idea that providing patients with information could be a bona fide therapy in and of itself. And I started doing lots of desk-based research, trawling through Google Scholar, to see how much evidence there was around this. And I discovered that there's lots and lots of evidence, common sense, but it says provide patients with information prior to an intervention, experience reduced anxiety, and that can lead to better clinical outcomes. So kind of armed with that thought, I started to think about what an intervention might look like. And I suppose this is where my agency background and my interest in design kicked in, because we devoted some agency downtime to exploring this idea. And the first thing we did was invite some school children in on week-long placements. And we gave them the brief of what might you create if you were trying to help children going into an unfamiliar hospital setting. What would you design? What would you build? These were kids of aged about 14, 15, doing their, I think it's year 10 work experience. And to a T, they all came up with game ideas. And actually one of those game ideas is in Xploro today. They all came up with game ideas. And so we knew that whatever we did was going to be involve games or gamification in some way, shape or form. So this was 2016, I think. And round about the same time, I had a chance meeting with the clinical director at the UK's biggest children's hospital, Royal Manchester, a guy called Dr. Peter Mark Fortune. I shared our ideas about what we were doing with Peter Mark, and he was really enthusiastic. And with his help, we actually managed, in my fundraising journey, although it's a tiny amount of money, this is one of the things I'm proudest about. We actually managed to get some money out of the NHS to do some initial prototyping. Really small amount of money, 20k. And a UX research agency that I was working with at the time, a group called Sutherland Labs, also gave us 25k's worth of user research time. So with our minimal amount of money, we built some really basic prototypes and took them into Royal Manchester, and just tested the idea that a combination of games, 3D models, augmented reality 3D models could help children engage with their healthcare journey. And the results of that were phenomenal. We discovered that there was a real gap, and we were filling that gap. Children were kind of lapping this information up and really engaging with these very basic prototypes that we built. So that's really kind of the origin story. And I can go on and talk more about what happened after that. But that's how Xploro came about.
Awesome. It's a funny one, isn't it? That I've talked about this recently. We did an event at Google about AI and imaging recently, and I had this sort of moment on stage when the speakers were talking about. I sort of had this idea crystallized that I think in healthcare there are at least two, there are many, but when it comes to technology and adoption, there are two different frontiers that as entrepreneurs, we're all trying to change in some way. We're all trying to push these two frontiers forward in some way. I think one of them is a technology frontier, what is actually possible with the technology. And that is pushed forwards by those that are exploring or developing large language models, MedPalm 2 at Google, like that kind of technology frontier and pushing what's genuinely possible. I think lagging way behind that is an adoption frontier about what is actually doable, possible, and acceptable within a healthcare environment. And that is not dependent on the technology frontier, because everything between that frontier and the technology frontier could be adopted, but isn't for some reason. And I think there are plenty of companies working on that adoption frontier, because I think what moves that adoption frontier forwards is patient education, workforce education, like digital literacy stuff. It's infrastructure change, putting Wi-Fi in all the hospitals that actually works. There's all of these things that contribute. And I haven't fully got that list yet because I'm still sort of working on this in my head. But like, I think there's a big list of things, like problems that need to be solved to push that adoption frontier. And whilst you've got people working on like quantum computing and all these exciting technologies and pushing what's actually possible forwards, simultaneously, you've got a heck of a lot of people trying to push the adoption frontier forwards. And my hypothesis is that actually within healthcare, I think so much more needs to be done to push that adoption frontier forwards. But it's a question of business model. It's a question of how do you actually make that worth people's time, worth an entrepreneur's time? Because the unit economics of building a tech company in a SaaS platform are glorious. 90% margins, massive raise, massive exit, bought by Google or Facebook, whatever, and you're away. Whereas actually this side of things is a lot more hard graft, and especially I think more relatable to someone that's got a story like yours, a personal connection to this, that can actually see and feel where that change is going to make a difference. But interestingly, probably your agency background and bootstrapping as well, you're probably quite au fait with actually building a business that just works and actually is profitable and does, like, it's the tortoise versus the hare type thing of like those tortoise businesses that are just small and do a job and stay profitable, that gain momentum over time. That's probably, I don't know, again, I'm hypothesizing, but that's probably more relatable to someone like you than someone that wants to just build a tech company and exit, right? Which I'm not convinced is like where we need to be in healthcare right now. So I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if that's relatable.
Yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think the key thing is, we didn't start with a technology and think, how can this be applied?
Yeah,
we started with a need, and the need was patients need better education about their healthcare journey. So we were completely agnostic about the technology that we were going to build. I didn't get into this thinking, hey, how can I use augmented reality and games and artificial intelligence in healthcare? Oh, I know. I'll wrap it around patient education. That is not how we approached this at all. We approached it by thinking, let's talk to patients, let's talk to clinicians, let's find out what the gaps in service are. When we've identified those gaps, let's think about how the end users, the patients, are best going to engage with whatever we build. And it could have been, we might have done some research that said, and I don't believe this, but we might have done some research that said a leaflet would be the best way of delivering education to patients. And obviously our research didn't find that. Our research found that kids love playing games. So it's not, for me, it's never about the technology. It's never about pushing a technology. It's about serving a need.
And actually, and I guess, I'm in agreement with you. And I think that's what you've done very well. I think you are moving the adoption frontier forwards by educating patients. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter what technology does that. It just so happens that augmented reality can do it. It just so happens that you can do all these different things that will do that. But ultimately, it's knowing that actually the low-hanging fruit here is the fact that the patients aren't educated about their condition, their journey, their path through the system. And by correcting that, you're going to make a big leap forwards in then what's possible. And you can layer technology on top of that, right? But ultimately, technology is not going to sit on top of a system where the patients aren't educated about their journey. And this is the point I'm trying to make. And actually, similar to the workforce as well. Like, if the workforce aren't educated about the value of augmented reality, then augmented reality is not going to sit on there. And so if nobody's educated on the value of it, nobody's going to get buy-in, and therefore adoption's not going to happen. And this is true, like human factors stuff and human-centered design stuff that I know that you know about. And like, it's this that I think people are missing right now. And I think, well, not missing, I think there's less people that are working on that or aware of it, I think. And that's sort of where I'm getting to. Like, I know that the computer science is exciting. I know that the engineering is exciting, but there are these fundamental issues that need to be solved, like patient education and like workforce education and digital literacy and just getting Wi-Fi that works in order to support the fun, exciting technologies that everyone's talking about, that have that unit economics, that have everything in the big A. Like, it for me, it is these infrastructure changes right now and moving this adoption frontier forwards with these types of things. It's interesting the way that you describe it as well, actually. And I want to go into more detail about what it actually is and what it actually does. And I think we can definitely move on to that. But before I do, a while ago now, it must have been like something, maybe even longer years ago, I got invited to go to Finland to look at their healthcare ecosystem. It was with a few different people that were writing various bits and bobs at the time, like I sort of through the Forbes thing, like someone asked, like, so I went there with a load of people that wrote for different things, but we got this like tour around their paediatric hospital. And I don't know if you know this, but you're nodding, yeah. So this paediatric hospital was glorious. It was absolutely beautiful. It was clean. It was so well designed. The signage, like just things that you will appreciate a designer, right? The signage, just you knew where you were going. No matter where you are, you can't get lost in this place because somewhere in your eye line you can see where you're meant to go. Like there was this massive screen when you walk in, and not that I'm sort of evangelizing for tech for the sake of tech or whatever, but like there was a big screen on there. And this is a little touch, right? They'd got the kids in this hospital to each draw a fish. And
Yeah.
they would draw this fish, and then they would just upload the fish onto this screen. So this enormous screen, like 15-foot high screen, absolutely massive. There's just these fish that like the kids had drawn, which gave them a connection to the hospital and the place. And like whenever they would then come in, like they would see their fish on the in this like very weird but cool looking aquarium with all these like wonderfully drawn fish. But they could also pick a character. They could pick an avatar that would follow them around the hospital. With all the different screens in the corridors, their avatar would sort of follow them and come with them and be like a companion on their journey. And we talk about companion apps and things for drugs and stuff, but this is more like I suppose, literally just like a digital character companion that they had chosen that would accompany them on their journey. And this was all to facilitate, I suppose, a sense of belonging, a sense of understanding, a sense of connection to the child and their journey. And I thought that was just really, you could write it off as fluffy and pointless and not utility or whatever, but like it felt like really positive. And on top of that, so much of the technology in this hospital I would describe as imperceptible. There was so much technology doing so much of a job that you never saw. It's not gadgets, it's not things, it's just there doing a job. Like, it's organizing who goes in what room when, just by analyzing the footfall and who needs a room based on the computer system and blah, blah. Like, it's just figuring that out and telling you where to go. And that's not tech that's perceptible. It's not like a thing or a gadget. It's just there working. And so all of this is facilitating, I suppose, this like efficiency and I suppose to one point, like the obvious efficiency of like organizing rooms and stuff. But this patient understanding, this connection to your healthcare, because hey, what's going to make a kid less anxious and easier to treat from the clinician side, but having a better experience from the patient side? Well, it's having a character that follows you around. It's drawing a fish that goes like. Maybe I am just bought over by the way they presented it to me. I don't know, but I can completely see and understand this stuff.
So I think we might have been on the same tour, James. But
amazing.
Yeah. So I know the hospital really well, but I think unfortunately hospitals like that are few and far between. I've got to say, I was in Utrecht last week and had the pleasure of visiting. And this is the hospital in Helsinki is incredible. But last week I visited what I consider to be the absolute epitome of the best hospital experience for children, and it's a hospital called Princess Maxima Centrum. It's a paediatric cancer hospital, dedicated paediatric cancer hospital. Now, the Netherlands only has 600 kids a year with cancer, but this hospital has been. In fact, I think this month it's celebrating its 5th birthday. And in its 5 years since existence, it's managed single-handedly to bring the cancer survival rate up from 75% to 83%. And it's done that through incredible clinical care, but it's done that through providing a really patient-centered experience,
right?
That has involved patients and parents at every stage of the journey, and it does really simple things. Some of the things they're doing there. So, like for every patient room, and every patient gets their own room. There's an attached parent room, so parents can have privacy in their own bedroom.
Wow.
But it's attached to the patient room, and that parent bedroom. They have a rule that clinical staff can't walk in. So the parents have this private place. The kids, now I don't know, I don't know whether listeners can imagine, if you're having chemotherapy through the night, you've got beeps going on all the time from the machine that's administering the chemotherapy. So at Princess Maxima, what they've done is a really simple idea. They've put the machine outside of the bedroom and just connected a really long hose. So it's not always about technology. Sometimes it's about just these really simple systems thinking ideas that change the way clinical care is delivered. One of the things that I really loved, they showed me, they've got a playground outside. They've got a trampoline for wheelchair users. Imagine that. It's just incredible.
Wow.
So, and the other thing they did, which really impressed me, is when they built the hospital, they commissioned an architect who had no experience of building hospitals.
Nice.
He'd never built a hospital before. He'd
And
built lots of schools.
That can go one of two ways,
so he
can't it?
understood the way. Yeah, well, because he built lots of schools, he understood the way children circulate through buildings and where they congregate, where they socialise. And so, yeah, I mean, Children's Hospital in Helsinki, fantastic. Princess Maxima, fantastic. There's a hospital in Barcelona that we work with called Sant Joan de Déu, which also has that same kind of emphasis on patient experience. But unfortunately, those three hospitals are they're way up there in terms of understanding patient experience, but they're rare. They're not representative of the average children's hospital experience.
So we're talking now really about human-centered design and how that relates to patient engagement in their own care and with their treatments and the technologies that support that. So when it comes to the UK and even the US, actually, which I know that you're spending time in, where do you think the biggest wins are to be made here? I've tried to frame that positively rather than like trying to explain why everyone's terrible, but like, where do you think the biggest wins are in terms of improving this stuff? Because we can't just tear down every hospital and rebuild it like the one in Helsinki, the one in Utrecht. We can't do that. But how do you think we make things better?
Well, so the first thing, and this is a really simple thing to do, is talk to patients and talk to parents about what they need, and recognize, and this is something that, and as you said, we want to frame this positively, but I'm going to be a little bit negative for a second. Recognize that healthcare is about more than treating disease.
Yeah.
And in the UK, we're very much focused on treating disease. We forget that a big component of making patients better and improving their health outcomes is involving them in that process and engaging them in that process. If you build health literacy in children, then you're building the foundations for future generations who are better able to self-manage their healthcare. Now, self-management of healthcare, that's part of the big solution. So patient engagement has to be front and center of everything you do, not just to improve the patient experience, but also because it improves health outcomes and it improves procedural efficiency. So if you've got a patient that is engaged in their healthcare, they're going to move less when they have an MRI scan. They're going to take shorter times for their appointments. They're going to turn up to their appointments. You're going to reduce the number of did not attends. You're going to have a whole range of procedural efficiencies that are a direct result of the patient being engaged in their healthcare journey.
Yeah. Yes. That's so interesting. It's funny, man. Like I feel like I'm having like a load of, I feel like I've been stuck in the technology for so long now that like I'm almost one of those people that defaults to like what technology can change things. And actually, just going back to something that you said before about the beeps in the room reducing sleep and therefore them going outside. I actually, when you said that, I had this. I imagined. That's funny how my mind works. I imagine this meeting where a load of people have come in and they've gone, right, our patients aren't sleeping very well. What shall we do? And I can picture it that everyone's talking about sleep trackers and melatonin and like tech therapies and drug therapies, and I can imagine this room where some introverted person at the back just sticks their hand up and says, "What if we just put the noises outside?" Like, I could just imagine this room where this happened.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's so.
Well,
funny,
I don't know this for certain, but I'll bet you that idea of putting the noises outside came from a kid.
Interesting. Yeah. The patient themselves. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a parent. I mean, yes.
Yeah. Or a parent, yeah.
Indeed. So on this note then, of making things better, talk to me about Xploro Health. Talk to me about the idea, the MVP, and now selling it and scaling it. Talk me through that journey.
Yeah, so, I talked about our very early prototyping. And the idea at that stage was, let's produce 3D augmented reality models that help children engage with hospital environments. Let's do the same for hospital technologies, things like MRI scans. Let's make this based around an avatar that can answer any questions they have. So those were the kind of sort of basic principles: games, 3D environments, and an artificially intelligent avatar. And to this day, that's essentially what Xploro is. And I'll talk a little bit about the customer journey. So what the patient does when they first interact with Xploro is create a 3D avatar. And that avatar is intended to be their kind of friend and confidant as they travel through healthcare. So that avatar that they create will be there to advise them, there to answer questions, and there to introduce them to things like MRI scanners and ultrasound and blood tests and a whole range of other stuff. But key to that experience is that first and foremost, it's really playful. And the reason it's called Xploro, the reason the company's called Xploro, is because we wanted to convey the sense that the child or the young person, or ultimately the adult next year, but we'll get onto that. The child or the young person is deciding what information they engage with and when. So Xploro is all about the pull of information rather than the push of information. Typically in healthcare, particularly if you've got something like a cancer diagnosis, as I said earlier, provision of information is pretty poor. But when information is provided, and I think back to my own experience with my daughter, it was a barrage of stuff, and some of it was not age appropriate at all. Some of it was too much to take in at that time. So Xploro is all about the child thinking, well, hey, yeah, today I do want to go off and find out about MRI scanners, or today I just want to customize my avatar and play a game, and I don't want to engage with anything about healthcare because it's too scary. So we give the child that option to pull information as and when they want it, and that's the origin of the name. It's difficult to kind of imagine what Xploro might look like, but I often describe it as sitting somewhere between Pokemon Go and The Sims. And the reason why I frame it between those two very popular, very well-known consumer titles is because to achieve that level of engagement, we have to have a quality level, a quality threshold that is equivalent to, not to other hospital information, but equivalent to those mainstream multi-million download applications that children will go to and play with. So when they download Xploro, we want them to be engaging with it because it's a really fun, engaging experience, not because they're going to learn about osteosarcoma or how blood cancers are treated or whatever.
So it's a heck of a bar that you have to then set with the experience and with all those different things. So how are you practically doing that? Because to compare the resource of, I guess, a company like yours versus Rockstar Games, there's a discrepancy, right? So I'm interested, like, how practically you do that. And I'm selfishly indulging here because, like, as somewhat of a gamer myself, I'm interested.
Yeah, well, look, we're no Rockstar Games for sure. We've got a relatively small team. What we do have is bags of experience. So, I've been, in my agency life, I've been building products like this for 30 years. Obviously, technology's changed over those 30 years, but I have a lot of experience building ambitious tech products. And the team that we've hired within Xploro are all really highly experienced. Sometimes it's not just about the size of your team. Sometimes it's about the quality of your ideas and the quality of the input you get. And I think that some of our most important, or arguably the most important members of our team are our expert advisory board. And our expert advisory board is a group of kids. The youngest is 8, the oldest is 16, and they are our editors. So they decide what content meets the grade to go into Xploro, what content is good enough, what content is engaging enough. And sometimes, I'll give an example. So we spent, this time last year, we spent quite a lot of developer and designer time redesigning our avatar system. We made the avatar much, much more lifelike, much more like a kind of human form, I guess. And fortunately, before it was too late, we asked our expert advisors what they thought of it, and they said it's rubbish. Get rid of it. So we had to bin all of that work because the kids who are they're representative of our end users said no, it's not right. We prefer the old avatar. So we dumped the work and went back to the old avatar. So sometimes it's not just about the size of the team. It's about the quality of the processes you have in place. It's about and I'll come back, and I'll always come back to user engagement. It's about understanding user needs and making sure that your product meets those user needs.
You have a clear set of values, and I like that you keep returning to the same core beliefs around putting those patients, those children first, and actually respecting them for their ideas, having an expert advisory board and calling it that with 8-year-olds. I really respect that of you and your company. Like, I think that really shines through as like a personal value of yours. And I think partly that must come from the experience that brought you here in the first place with your daughter, right? Like knowing her and what she needed, and just, I suppose, wishing at the time. And I suppose as entrepreneurs, we all want to create the world we wish we had. We want to create the experience we wish we'd had. And I see that a lot in clinician founders, in patient founders, in parent founders, that it gives you a special type of purpose and a special resilience to those values as well, which I think is great and incredibly respectful, or deserving of an incredible amount of respect, because I think that leads to the greatest products, frankly, because I think we can all be guilty of cutting corners to make a buck, potentially. Those efficiency changes, building that avatar and actually going through all of that work, and the sunk cost of then realizing that was a cul-de-sac and turning all the way around. So rather than making an excuse of like, oh, they're only 8 years old, whatever, like I'm sure other 8-year-olds will like it, and telling yourself that story, you've respected that and sunk all of that cost for the benefit of everyone. And I just really respect that, mate. I think that's awesome. I want to talk to you now about the buyers actually of this, because I think that respect for the product is great. But one thing you mentioned earlier is that health literacy in children leads to better self-managers of healthcare later in their life. And that's a long-term payout. You also mentioned, but they turn up for appointments. There's less do not attends. They stay still in the MRI, so there's less cost associated with repeat diagnostics. So those are shorter term wins. Now, for the buyers of Xploro and other technologies similar, or actually, let's just go with you and make this personal to you guys. Like, how are you making that case to the buyer? Is it an economic one? Is it a moral and ethical one? Is it a patient experience one? What is that argument? And if it is like patient experience, are there metrics associated that with what that these buyers have to hit? Is that what they're going for? Like, I'm interested in that like sales bit, because I think here is a key to unlocking entrepreneurs focusing on increasing the quality of care, not just making it cheaper.
It's all of the above in terms of what drives the sale. Obviously, it's not all of the above with every customer, but some customers will be purchasing Xploro because they want to improve patient experience. Other customers will be purchasing Xploro because they want to improve procedural efficiency, and sometimes it's a combination of the two. It's interesting. We did our research partners did a research study back in 2019, which is published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, which showed that children using Xploro demonstrated a statistically significant reduction in anxiety, as well as statistically significant increases in patient satisfaction and knowledge about procedures, which is great, and it's fantastic to have that published research. But if you're going to a hard-nosed procurement person in a not very forward-thinking hospital, they're going to say, well, that's really nice, but
so what?
How's it going to save me money in this financial year? And the truth is that it probably isn't just on those metrics alone. And so one of the things that we've been focusing on very much is how do we prove out some of those health economic benefits? How do we prove out some of those claims I made earlier about reduction in repeat procedures, reduction in appointment times? We've actually got a quality improvement study going on right now at Boston Children's Hospital in the States, who are a customer. They've been a customer just coming up for their second year now. And that's looking at those procedural efficiencies in a radiology department. One of the key things for us over the coming year or so will be to start building more quantitative data around procedural efficiency, because that is a really important driver for us. We've had some help from our local academic health science network as well in building a cost benefit analysis model around procedural efficiencies, and that too is an important tool in our arsenal when we're going into a hospital. You can imagine, a man in a grey suit looking at Xploro and thinking, "What the hell is this doing in a hospital setting?" But actually, it's an important tool that can save hospitals money and can improve the patient experience. Yeah, so it's very much about sort of building up arguments around those areas, and I think, we've touched a couple of times on the fact that we're probably more active in the States than we are in the UK, and one of the reasons for that is, there are, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of things that are very, very broken in the US healthcare system, not least access to healthcare for people with low incomes. But one of the things that competitive commercialized system does as a byproduct, an unintentional byproduct, I think, of the commercialization of the system, is it places an emphasis on patient experience.
Yeah.
And so where in the UK, it's very, very difficult to go to a hospital and make an argument based solely on patient experience. In the US, it's not so difficult. In the US, they take patient experience seriously because they see patients as customers, rightly or wrongly.
They have choice. They have choice around where they spend their healthcare money. That's Yeah.
Well, some people have choice.
Correct.
In the States, some people have no choice at all.
Good point. Yeah. So, in terms of your scale, then, you've mentioned the US, you've mentioned UK, but you're doing things in other continents too. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So this is a story that I'm really proud about. It's non-commercial activity. So,
okay.
2 years ago, 2 years ago. Yeah, I think about 2 years ago, we teamed up with a charity called World Child Cancer, who help children in low and middle income countries, children and their families in low and middle income countries go through cancer treatment. And we said to World Child Cancer, look, you can have unlimited licenses for Xploro in these low and middle income countries. Cover the cost of localization, whatever that might be, but we'll give you unlimited licenses. And so now we're in use in Ghana, a couple of hospitals in Ghana. We're in use in Malawi. We've actually translated Xploro into Chichewa, which is the language spoken in Malawi. And we're going live in Cameroon in, I think, a couple of weeks' time.
Wow.
That project is so central to why I do what I do. When we get photos back of kids using Xploro in an African hospital setting, you know that there is absolutely no way they would normally have access to a resource like that.
Yeah.
And the feedback we get from them is just incredible. It's really incredible. And I should tell us a quick story just to yet again bring this back to patient engagement and patient experience. When you name the avatar in Xploro, and this is any user, when they create a name for their avatar, there's no opportunity for free text entry because we use that avatar in multiplayer gaming. So they have to choose from a predetermined list of first names and a predetermined list of second names. And they're usually sort of funny combinations. So your avatar might be called something like Johnny Chewy Fingers or Jennifer Baggy Britches or something like that. Now that works in the English language because you've got funny, we understand funny second names like Baggy Britches. When we went to Ghana, we got a group of Ghanaian kids to come up with funny names in Akan. And so I've no idea what these funny names are that they came up with or what they mean. I'm hoping they've all been sanitized, so they're not too rude. But we got these kids to come up with funny first names and second names, and then we put a Ghanaian name set into the avatar customizer so that they can choose Ghanaian names that are appropriate to them.
That's so nice.
So bringing this back to your question, yeah, we are active in Africa, not for profit in Africa, but we're active.
It's coming back to this two things really for me, that you're purpose driven and being able to do that in Africa is clearly something that gives you the energy to then face the commercial challenge elsewhere. And I think it's a really good example, I think, of knowing who you are yourself as an entrepreneur and knowing what is going to nourish you and energize you and give you the purpose behind what you're actually doing. Because frankly, well, it's not assigning a value to a child in a high-income country getting benefit versus a child in a low-income country getting benefit. Ultimately, it's a child getting benefit, full stop. And actually, that is the win here. It's just that in a model where you need to grow as a business to create this impact, you will need to sell it and adopt a commercial model. And I think that's the whole point, is that you can do that and then offset it and give the value elsewhere. And the more money and profit that comes in, the more the product can get better, the better the patient engagement, the better all round. And I think it's just a really nice model, that, and knowing yourself as an entrepreneur and knowing that you will be nourished by that is incredibly important. I think ultimately, man, like the other thing is that I feel like this conversation with you, for me, has put back onto the table the actual benefit of understanding the patient in all this and giving the patient a voice in all this. These are words that are said a lot on LinkedIn. You know, these are words that are said a lot, I think, in pitches and in investor meetings and in sales meetings. I think these are words that are said a lot, and by no means am I saying that people don't mean them. I'm not saying that at all. But for me personally, I think this has been an opportunity for me to reconnect with the value of what that actually does mean. What I mean by that is having 8-year-olds on an advisory board and what that actually means for how you develop the product. Coming at this from a place of genuinely wanting to see the change that you wished you had from your patient perspective or parent perspective, and appreciating that the patient voice is an expert voice. But actually leaning into that, the patient voice is the expert voice if what you're going after is greater patient experience, which, if you want your technology to be adopted, no matter where you monetize, the patient experience and the patient voice is still incredibly valuable. So I'm grateful to you for coming on today, and I'm grateful for you being so honest and clear about your values, because I feel like I've learned something from you today, and I genuinely do appreciate that. And you're doing incredible work, mate. You're doing incredible work scaling what you're doing. I think it's incredibly valuable. I've seen it in that Helsinki hospital. I've seen where this goes well and what it leads to. And I genuinely wish you all the best of luck with it. For those people that are listening that feel similar or want to get in touch with you, either because they run a hospital that would benefit from this, which I'm sure is 99% of hospitals on earth, the 1% being the ones that have this. If people want to get in touch with you to learn more, or to speak to you, or indeed to find out more about Xploro, what's the best way for them to do so?
Probably the best way to get in touch is to check me out on LinkedIn, send me a connection request, and make sure you mention this show. If you mention this show, I'll accept it. If you don't mention this show and I don't know who you are, I probably won't accept it. So be sure to mention this show. But check me out on LinkedIn. Really happy to have a conversation with anyone who's interested in how we can provide better engagement for patients in their healthcare journey. And that's not just kids, that's adults too.
Awesome. Dom, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me.